where we need to.
Done. Trustee DeGray.
I think, first of all, I totally agree with Jim on the whole aspect of we need to be a little more pro-business. I agree with Mr. Alex on pretty much everything he's proposing here because it does help clarify a lot of those gray areas as I've listened to this. Again, I don't think traffic is an issue, or it has not been an issue. I belong to a lot of service organizations, and yes, I think those are the type of events that would be nice to be held out at the event barn, and they always involve raffles and everything like that. That's how you raise money with service organizations. So at this point, I'm totally in favor of clarifying the language in the code and just making it a little bit cleaner.
Trustee Dunn. Trustee Newman.
I'm kind of on the same page as Jim as well. I do have a couple of quick questions, though. What is the parking situation over by you guys? Are people parking on the road? Are people parking? What's going on?
Yeah, no, it's prohibited from parking on the road. We have a well, are we talking about our specific? I'll reference the exact code, but it's similar to a banquet hall when this was set up. So again, since we're talking about the general code, I think it's a 1-to-3 ratio, Sean, is that correct? Yeah, the minimum number of parking spaces shall be equal to 1 parking stall per 3 attendees. So your occupancy is based on a couple of things. Your occupancy is based on the size of the footprint of the building. Commercial building code, it gets into real minutia, but let's just call it 15 square foot per person. Then it falls over, you have that much space in the 4 walls of your building. Now you have to be able to allow those people to use facilities, bathrooms. So now you have to put in bathrooms that equate to the number of people that you have inside the 4 walls. Once those 2 things are decided, then you have to decide how many parking stalls that relates to. So if you have 300, it's a 3-to-1 ratio, you get 100 parking stalls. So that's written in the code as well, that you can't spill over onto streets. It has to be on improved parking stalls.
Okay, that answers my question. Just being that you're the only permitted use of this,
yeah, so it's
kind of
item
everything
O,
directs to you or your case.
Yeah, item N talks about the number of spaces. Item O talks about how the spaces have to be defined, and item P talks about no parking on public roadways. Okay.
And then the only real issue that I would have is, maybe we should be a little bit more specific, into striking out what we can and what we shouldn't be striking out. But also, I think we should stick with 10% changes on the building.
Trustee Dunn. Trustee Dash.
I also appreciated what you had to say, Jim. You touched on a lot of issues that I think were very reasonable. And I find Mr. Alex to be a rather honorable man. This is his home, and his family lives there on the premises. I can't picture him allowing any type of activity that would put them in jeopardy as far as renting out his facility. I don't see a problem with the traffic issue. The amount of people that are allowed to use the facility at any one time can come and go, whether it's a wedding, a trade show, or whatever the facility is being used for. They're going to be coming and going at different times. Even for a wedding, they're not all going to come at one time and leave at one time. They're going to sprinkle in and out. I don't think that's a problem on that road. I'm in favor of allowing the change that he is proposing.
Any further comments. I do have to ask, because before closing the public hearing, obviously, we can adjourn the public hearing for further information or review of the public record or any other records you want to look at, or we can close the public hearing, and I find it best just to go around the room and just ask specifically to make sure that everyone has sufficient information to make a decision. The decision doesn't have to be necessarily made tonight. I'll get to that after we close the public hearing. But once you close the public hearing and we go to discussion, there is no more testimony, including from Mr. Alex or any members of the public. It's just the board and the plan commission. So I'll go around the room just to make sure.
Can I
We
speak?
have final comments coming.
Okay, I just didn't
You
know
want to
if
have
would you like me to speak to the 10%? Because I know that we were talking a lot about
Oh,
these.
sure. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you for final comments as well as the board members before closing, but I wanted to make sure if somebody had a question, we'll get the final comments and we'll
Okay.
get to your 10%. I just want to make sure that there isn't any more information that is needed, because I don't want to close the public hearing prematurely, because you can't open it back up. So Commissioner Ronaldo, you've got everything you need?
Yeah, I think the 10% thing is a little bit strange, because if somebody was in, and I try to very much consider this generically, not just one candidate here. You know, if can't, Amy Fish mentioned she imagined this, but if I was planning an event barn, you could do something to the floor space before you got decreed of event barn, right? It's your property, it's your barn, it's whatever. You could do whatever before that point. All depends how well you thought out the usage of the space. I also, I forget, Jim never said it, I'm not sure. But I'm actually curious, it's not a matter of decision, I'm curious what the 10% does for you. Is it just to allow coat hanging space or something? I mean, I can see where, if you start with a barn, you need to make a more proper entrance, there's a variety of things you're gonna need to do to make it suitable. So I can see that. At this point in time, you've been in operation, you wanna extend larger, what does the extra space do for you?
Yeah, so,
We'll just go with you, because you wanted to comment about the 10%.
yeah, because that was something.
So you can blend in your, have your comment. But you'll still get a final comment, just,
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate that. So to clarify, or not clarify, but to further highlight, like you mentioned, as an agricultural building, there is possibly some ambiguity as far as once you put it into service as an event barn. The language in the definition says originally constructed prior to June 12th of 2019. So that kind of said, from this point on, if it wasn't there on June 12th of 2019, that kind of, sets it out. Someone could possibly argue to say, well, most of the building was there. There are aerial GIS images that would be able to show you historically what's there. You could look at, building techniques and materials to know. But I would say, just to answer that question of, could someone today buy a building, expand on it a big, and say, hey, here's the original footprint? Sean might be able to speak to that, but I know that date was included in there for that reason. Specifically with respect to the footprint area, you're right, there is a lot of infrastructure that has to go into building one of these out. You have to have bathroom facilities, you have to have stair corridors, you have to have, mother's room, and then the other thing you have to have is storage. So the blanket language that's here is the floor area of an existing building to be used for event activities. So is that saying if it's storage, is that considered for event activities? My reading with the language as it sits is, there are walls, this is the footprint, anything that happens inside of that coincides with event activities. So a large portion of our existing footprint has to be used for things like bathrooms, kitchen facilities, storage facilities, circulation, those types of things. So this would alleviate some of that stress. So the 20% would be in our, again, let's just go with it. In our specific scenario, 20% would be a very usable amount of space for us to relieve the stress on those other areas.
But you went from the barn to being in operation prior, right?
Correct.
So some of that was already accommodated.
Correct. Yep. Yeah.
So you're not even utilizing the 10% at this time?
The footprint is the original footprint, correct? Is that what you're saying? The original footprint,
You haven't expanded it at all?
correct. Yep, correct.
How do you know that 10% won't be enough? What is the square footage of the barn?
The footprint square footage is 3,400 square feet based on the conditional use language of our specific conditional use.
340 some feet would not be enough for additional usage?
Correct, just with how it lays out and where it lays out, that footprint being expanded, and it's actually an area that used to be a lean-to structure on the building itself that, prior to us owning it, had kind of collapsed. So it would be reestablishing that. But yes, to answer the question bluntly, that would allow our operations to function better.
And you mentioned storage for a number of different items.
Correct, yep.
How many other buildings are on the property that could be used for storage?
That could be used for storage. Right now, we have a horse barn that we use for storage. There's a hog barn, there's a granary building. There are other buildings that could be used for storage. But from a functional standpoint, things like tables and chairs and things that need to have ready access, food goods that have to be in the same building, you can't store that in a shed or off, premises of that. Liquor has to be stored and locked, dishware, those types of things that have to be readily accessible.
The only other, it's not a question, but to me, the original rules weren't as gray maybe as they've been painted to be. I see this as an enlargement in scope, which is a choice. And I try to think of the community aspect of that. That's all I have.
Do you have enough information, Dan?
I keep hearing about gray areas in our code. I don't know, hasn't our code been reviewed by our attorney? Hasn't it been reviewed by the hearing examiner? Nobody pointed out any gray areas to me. Sean never expressed any gray areas when we were writing this.
Right, as you recall, Sean wrote it, John Macy, our attorney, reviewed it, hearing examiner interpreted it.
Has our attorney reviewed the new proposal?
Yes, he's has his comments. He's got,
Yeah, I was going to read his comments into the record, but before we close the public hearing.
yeah, in terms of the gray area, I mean, we tried to, when we first drafted this language and then when it was modified, we tried to be as careful as possible about describing the language.
And you stated that Mr. Ellick helped you.
We did. We wrote it together, but he and then it was further modified when we amended the code. That wasn't his. He didn't ask for the definition to be amended. That's something the village did to further clarify that items open to the general public were not allowed at the time. But in terms of gray area, I guess I'd just say that it's, there are scenarios, I think, that Mr. Alex pointed out, that it's tough to determine. And we didn't, the hearing examiner did come down on our side when he ruled on this, but there are certain scenarios where the person hosting the event or the person booking it and inviting people, there is a bit of a, potential gray area in there in terms of, who knows, right? There could be a club. One of the scenarios that we talked about was potentially a dinner club that's started by someone, whether they're affiliated with the event barn or not, maybe an employee or a cousin or somebody that knows the Alexes that would start a dinner club and invite people or sell tickets off to the side, not in association with the event barn. People sign up for this list, they get on this list, and then they book the event with the Alexes, And so it's removed in a certain way. Would we ever know? No. And so there is some grayness to it.
We're thinking pretty hard to come up with scenarios.
Totally, but there are plausible things. And so just speaking, I think to Mario's point is that I think it's, the new definition is simplified, but it does allow a broader range of types of events. And that's sort of the bottom line.
I guess I'm not concerned with the broader range of events, but it's the fact that the applicant can host his own events.
Right. And so
It's open to the public.
it is,
Which is in violation of the intent of the CU.
as the way it's currently written, correct.
Any further information that you need, Jim? Questions?
Yeah, not really. I mean, I'm not sold on violation of the intent.
Why did it go to Board of Appeals?
That has nothing to do with it. That was a separate, no, listen,
The same issue.
separate issue. Now he's back looking to change the verbiage. That's all, which is perfectly
Or one
legitimate.
entity within the village.
So allow more. There aren't any. But, I'm concerned that we're over-restrictive for reasons other than what's best for Vernon.
If we were over restrictive, he wouldn't be in business now.
You're making it hard for him to stay in business. It's not what he asked for originally,
Right.
which I can understand are putting restrictions, on some of that, 100%. But I don't see that people have to know each other, or that he has to have somebody else come in with a group, rather than being able to do it themselves. It's an event. As long as the event doesn't change the substance of what we say in the ordinance, and it follows all the other rules, what difference does it make? That's what I don't see.
By allowing him to host his own events, he's operating a business.
Well, I would hope so.
It is not a business district.
Yeah, but that's why he got a conditional use, in the first place. I agree with that. That's all I got.
Dan, any further information? Before we listen to final comments and close the public hearings.
Have you guys ever been to an event barn?
Yeah.
You have. To wedding and stuff like that? Okay. All right.
Right. Okay, so we'll go to final comments. We'll give petitioner, Mr. Alex,
I
final
guess,
comments, and we'll go around the room if anybody else has any final comments. I know we've had a lot of discussion. Go right ahead.
first I'll address what Jim and Dan were kind of talking about. That, Jim, you're exactly right. That's why this is a conditional use. That's why there's a process by which the conditional use is allowed in certain districts. This district allows for this use. So the other thing I would say is this is a secondary use, as much as, people would think that it is not. It is a secondary use to the primary residence. So there's an occupancy requirement. I think Noreen Dashik talked to that point. So that was, and Ed Moline, I think, was the one on the time that said, I really like the flavor of that, because it shows that you have skin in the game. It shows that you are residing on the property. So as much as you want to say, well, it's not in a commercial district, exactly, it's a residential district in the sense that it is a residence as the primary use, and the conditional use, which is secondary, is as the event barn. Next, I would have a question. I'm a little bit taken aback by the fact that the comment was that there is no gray area. Sean, can you speak to any idea of the gray area, that gray area being from October of 2020 to the letter drafted in March of 2021? I don't want it painted that we were operating under the radar or outside of the scope of what we believe the agreement to have been. So, Sean, in that time period, wasn't there was a lot of discussion at that point between us to say, well, what would be an event? We kind of went back and forth. Should we come up with an exhaustive list of this event is okay, but this one isn't? And we kind of said, well, just like in the scenarios we had here, if we put banquet as an acceptable event, I can change the who hosts it or who pays for it or who shows up to it to make a banquet not acceptable. So in that time period, there was gray area. The gray area, again, with our business plan and operation, it's stated items such as self-hosted events. The only reason that I'm revisiting this, Dan, is because the comment was made, well, why are you coming back? So if your argument is, why are you coming back to change it? My argument to you would be, we read the definition, the zoning administrator read the definition, we looked at our business plan and operation, and then the board and commission looked at it and said, all of this meets the definition. So if we're being told your reading of it and our reading of it meets the definition, then why would we ask for any change? The other thing that I will highlight is that at the June 29th meeting, for people who were on the board and commission at that time, there was language that was inserted that this language specifically being called into question now was inserted by President Fortner, at the time Town Chairman Fortner. That wasn't part of an exhaustive process of vetting back and forth. That was and while we're at it, let's add this language. It wasn't properly noticed. It wasn't, it was given to us by Sean before to say, hey, and this is going to be brought up today too. That wasn't some exhaustive process at that point, everybody had kind of had enough of us and wanted it to move along. And after that meeting, Sean, did we have question? We said this part of the language was not part of the motion that should be included in our conditional use?
I think that was discussed, and we'd said...
I questioned it,
yes,
correct?
and we
so
said...
to your point, Dan, when you said, well, why did you sign it? We were told, well, sign this or sue us. Sign this or you can't open and operate. And we said, no, this wasn't properly noticed. This wasn't part of a motion even to apply to ours specifically. It was included, and we said we would rather operate than try and litigate. Yeah. To the definition, so the definition that we're changing has this not like a restaurant and trade show. So in the definition that you're reading,
Event barns by definition do not include uses that are otherwise specifically provided for as a permitted or conditional use in the code. That was added at the time.
correct. And so I guess what I'm trying to do is allow you to understand, for those who weren't around or who were around but don't remember that one, this was originally part of our original application in various spots. Two, that there were, gray areas from the onset or things that we didn't want to have to agree to, but we're told we had to agree to. And three, that there has been a concerted effort to try and be difficult for the way that we wanted to operate our business from day one or even before day one. Then getting to some of the other direct points. I hit on the 10 versus 20%, but I think that's all that I would have.
Thank you. Final comments from Plan Commission or Board. I will say this, your recollection of what occurred is a matter of public record, and if that's an issue, I would disagree with how you characterized it.
Are you referring to June 29th?
June 29th,
Okay.
right?
That, just so everybody knows, there are not minutes for June 29th. There are June 29th minutes for the cell tower. There were 2 public hearings that day. I have gone through and I've listened to the audio recording of it. I have timestamps for times when things were brought up, but there aren't any official minutes for that. So it's kind of hard to bring that as a reference point.
Other than using the audio tape.
Yeah, and so we can go through that process if necessary.
But I don't want to belabor that point necessarily. It's just, that's your view of it, and I think that's not exactly what happened. But I will read before I close the public hearing here, the attorney comments. So he says, This is a policy decision. It is my recommendation that the amendment be voted up or down as submitted by the petitioners, although the village could divide the issue into two separate parts, one dealing with modifying the limit for expansion of floor area of existing buildings from 10 to 20%, and including a provision that the expansion area cannot be used to increase the occupancy load of the original building. The other being modifying the definition of an event barn with respect to the meaning of the term private function. It is the Alex's petition, and the language, in my opinion, should not be modified by the village. So suggestions that we can modify this at tonight's meeting or a future meeting is contrary to our attorney's advice. The way the petition for a zoning code text amendment was presented, it's two issues, the floor, the 10% issue, let's just say 10 to 20% issue, and the private function issue, let's say, or the definitional issue as presented. And I would think, I asked specifically, Attorney Macy, as Sean knows, is this voted up and down together or voted up and down separately? He answered it, it's voted up and down separately, and part of which is the way it was presented. You have two distinct amendments and they stand on their own independently. Had you written it differently, the attorney may have had a different.
Which is why I wrote it that way.
Right, so that was your intent. Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yep.
That's what you intended, instead of assuming that. So when we close the public hearing and go to discussion, I would recommend that we follow our attorney's advice. We have separate votes on each proposal, and they're either up or down. So other than that, any other final comments? I think I've had
So
my final comments, so.
to clarify, there's a plan commission motion to recommend, and then there's a board. Whether they use that recommendation, they can decide on their own, just so everybody's clear on that.
Yeah, Sean, why don't you, since he.
Yeah,
raised-
that's correct. As ever, the Plan Commission recommends to the board. So on some things, the Plan Commission takes action on, accessory buildings and other things. But for a rezoning or a change to the actual text itself, the Plan Commission makes a recommendation, and the village board considers the Plan Commission's recommendation, but it doesn't have to be an affirmative recommendation for the board to take action.
Okay, otherwise I'm going to, it's getting late, close the public hearing and go on to item 6, discussion and possible action. We've had quite a bit of discussion in the public hearing, which is fine. I start off with joint discussion, Plan Commission and Village Board, and then Plan Commission action, then Village Board action on the agenda. As Sean pointed out, Plan Commission action comes first unless we want to further discuss, jointly discuss what the proposals are. Otherwise, we'll look to the Plan Commission action to either, Sean, help me out here if you will, either recommend to the board to approve the proposed zoning, well, we'll do them one at a time.
Right.
Or not, or deny them.
Yeah, so do you want to do which one first?
Well, we could take them in order is I'm looking back at the application, we'll have a grounding spot so we know why we did it. I think, wasn't the 10% the first one or not, or am I wrong about that? The pages aren't numbered, I guess.
It probably doesn't matter.
Probably doesn't matter. Well, we can do it doesn't matter to me either which one we do first.
So, we did a motion for, let's say, the 10% to 20% with the caveat that the extra space can't be used to determine occupancy.
Rich was part of the proposal. That
Which
sentence.
was their specific proposal.
So do we have a motion to recommend approval or denial to the board from the Plan Commission?
I make a motion that we deny the application as submitted.
And that's just the 10% we're talking about at this point, and then we'll get to the next one, okay?
My motion includes the whole thing.
Oh, you're gonna do them, okay, well, we can do them can we do them separately? Just so people aren't voting against one and then saying, well, now I want to do them separately. Let's just do them separately. So we'll do the 10 to the, as Sean pointed out, the 10 to the 20% and with the additional a language that does not increase occupancy. So you have a motion to recommend denial. Is there a second? I'll second it. Any discussion, further discussion by the planning commission?
One question, might seem weird, but we say you can, right now it says you can go up to 10%.
Right.
What if you go up to 10% this year? And then 2 years from now that you find out that ain't enough and you want to add another 10%. Is that doable?
It's doable, but I haven't seen anything submitted here that shows that 10% is needed.
No, I understand that. But I was just wondering if,
Yeah, I don't know the answer to,
know?
answer to that, Sean. I
in my-
pulled it
my-
up on the screen, so I
As
don't
zoning
know.
administrator, my interpretation would be total. So they have a
Total, right.
building, they do 10% one year. If you did adopt a new language that says 20%, they could do 10% the next year, but that would make it 20%. They couldn't go any further than that.
what if we didn't change? If we stayed at 10%,
And 10%, that's it ever.
does it say of the total existing or original?
Well, the language is,
It's in letter T, Sean, if you can.
yeah, the language is the
300-20.
floor area of an existing building to be used for event activities may be expanded for event activities by no more than 10%. Period. And then, or comma, provided all building and zoning requirements are satisfied. Does not include alterations made to accommodate for items such as access or circulation, which will be considered on a case-by-case basis. So I read that as 10% ever, except for access and circulation on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Existing building.
Right.
Right. And the existing building we're talking about is the ag building that was in existence
Yeah.
and used for ag purposes on June, whatever that date, 2019.
I think it'd be unreasonable to consider they can come back for 10%, then 10%, then 10%. That, I would not.
You wouldn't?
Yeah, the context doesn't read that way, in my opinion.
Okay. That's all I had.
Any other discussion by the planning commission? Well, it's a joint discussion, and board can kick into it.
Part of that. So if somebody wants to do this, does the inspector go down there and say, well, you gotta have handicap access, you gotta have this, you gotta have that? Does that apply to? No, it doesn't.
Well- Well, if a conditional use, no more, you can't do any more. If a conditional use comes forward for an event barn, and we're not gonna, we want to see a full, complete submittal as part of that. So we want to see the plans that are part of it. We want to see the exits and egresses, and we'd expect, before that happened, they'd have it sorted out in terms of what they needed for, 2 accesses and fire exit and whatever it is. So that would be something we'd expect up front. And so if they needed, let's say, a fire escape added onto it or something, that would be the case-by-case basis for access. I don't think that would be included in the 10%.
Right, so wheelchair ramps, fire
Right.
exits,
In other words,
ventilation
what I'm asking about
systems.
Is the kind of things covered by that access?
I would say probably not, because the Alexes know this code very, very well. And so what they're proposing probably doesn't meet the definition of that.
Well, you're bringing up something totally different. I'm asking if, normal code stuff is within the scope of that comment related to access. You're referring to.
No, explain what you mean by normal code stuff.
$44 inches or whatever the number is for a wheelchair to get past, 2 fixtures.
I would say that's included in the exception, yes.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was asking. Circulation. Oh, that's what you mean by circulation. Right. No, I didn't study so.
Right, that's exactly what it means.
Okay.
It's again, case by case, though. If someone comes forward and says, no, that's not legitimate.
Well, the other thing is, that changes forever. Those rules.
Yeah, they may change, yeah. The ADA accessibility and so on may change in 10 years, it might be different. And so we'll have to look at that at the time and say, yeah, that's,
Sense to let that flow.
right.
Right, and we let it float, simply for that reason.
Trying to appreciate the logic.
Yep. Plan Commission, any discussion? Any discussion? Motions made and seconded to recommend denial to the board of the 10%, 20 proposed change. This is Plan Commission, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah. Well,
You voted aye?
uh-huh.
Okay, the motion
Unanimous.
The motion passed, no, motion passed 3 votes to 1 vote.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Recommend denial.
Yep.
Okay, now, next up is definition of event barn, for lack of a better term. So we know what it is, as proposed. I mean, this is all as proposed, we're not changing anything, as proposed.
I'll make the motion that the planning commission recommend approval as requested.
For the definition.
Yes.
Yep. Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. You made the motion, you can start.
Yeah, I had a question until you said I could ask it. Darn it. Oh, with the exception, when I strike that, not the part that they talked about not being able to sell stuff at it, is that in there?
It's struck, so they can sell it. They can do it. Open to
Well, I wanna
general-
unstruck
open to
it.
the general public, and they can sell it.
Yeah, I don't mind, no,
As long
you
as
know.
they ticketed it prior, no walk-ins, prior to the event, prior to the gun show or fashion show or
Right.
Tupperware show or
And just to
whatever.
reiterate, that the attorney has recommended that no changes be made tonight, that you're voting up or down on the language as proposed. That's whether you follow his recommendation or not, that's up to you, but that's what he's recommending.
Okay. Well, I still have it proposing that we approve,
Okay,
recommend approval.
other discussion?
The only thing I would add is one thing I always try to get a sense of is there's no community people here that showed up for the open meeting to complain about this. So,
Well, that's why I mentioned the history there were and the initial go-arounds. And what we tried to do back then was address all of the community concerns, the Alex's concerns and so on. I think, I'm not in favor of any expansion of use that's in a residential area. I think we balanced it right the first time. Obviously, that's a viewpoint. But I'm concerned about, it's working now. And why create an opportunity so that it might not work? Not to say it will or it won't. No one can predict that unless it happens.
given that we've had plenty of conversation related to the comings and goings of the people to an event. The next piece of this, to me, really relates to, and we discussed traffic and such. The next piece relates to, well, maybe one of the reasons no one's showing up is these things are not that often. They're probably not pushing the limit of 3 events a week. But to me, all the backstops are still in place. The 3 events a week, the hours, you can't change the look of the building, whatever the language is. And so all of the original fences are retained. What's changed is what can go on there. I recognize and I suspect that the opening up by removing that one sentence is going to, why else would they want to change if not to increase business? They're not going to want to change to reduce business. So the likelihood is there will be more events, but this body already put a good original fence. I'm going on the notion of that fence hasn't moved, just what's going on at the event has moved. And now it's pretty much anything legal that they sell a ticket for 5 minutes before the event.
The day before. Up to, it has to be at least the day before the event.
How are we gonna know that? How are we gonna enforce that?
We're not going to know. It's going to be up to the petitioner to administer that. Every 2 years, obviously, they check in with us and attest to the events they've held and the number of attendees and all of the things that are required as part of these conditions. They attest to, and so unless we have complaints otherwise or someone witnesses it, we would not know. Just like any use in the village, we don't know if they're operating legally unless someone complains about it.
You're right, we're in the middle of a recommendation to the board, and in discussion, like I said, I'm not in favor of expansion. I'm concerned, because I think we struck the right balance before. There are fences, like you said, Mario, and those were all well thought out, and what we're trying to do is strike the balance. So that's, it's going to be opened up, there's going to be more events, more traffic in and out. I don't know about table turns, that might help. They could sell stuff, and I know you objected to that before, and we've clarified that, so it's all or nothing vote. So any further discussion, otherwise we'll get a vote on the motion, which is to recommend approval. So if you vote, you're recommending approval. Vote yes, you're recommending approval. If you vote nay, you're not recommending approval. Simple as that. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. So the tie vote 2-2, motion fails. Now, we could go the other way, but I suspect the motion will fail.
It's going to fail either way.
We want to test that, Dan? We could. Right. So now,
So Attorney Macy isn't here, so what does that mean for a recommendation to the board?
there, fails.
No, the
There is
recommendation
no
could be
recommendation.
not to vote for it. That would be the planning commission's vote because it failed. Right?
Commission has no recommendation,
Pardon me?
the planning commission will be sending no recommendation.
Well, they have a recommendation, and it's not to do it.
On the one, so you have the one you did, but the second,
Second one, no, I'm talking about the second one. The vote failed, it was tied. Therefore,
no recommendation.
recommendation is a no. I don't see why that wouldn't be absolute logic.
It wasn't approved.
If,
It was, but there,
we don't approve it, we just recommend, one way or the other, to the board.
but the recommend, because it is not construed as a no or a yes, because there's just no recommendation in there, so the board should not construed no recommendation as the planning commission against or for the motion that they took up.
But that doesn't seem right because, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, because we're stopping the board from being able to vote one way or the other. And I don't think that's the intent.
I can't speak to the formality that maybe Sean can.
Well, there's certainly a recommendation on one part, right? The 10 to 20%,
Yeah.
there's a clear recommendation of no on that one from the Plan Commission. The other one, it's 2-2, so I don't know what that means in context of the code. The code currently reads for these types of things, the town board, this is the old, when we were a town, the town board shall make a decision with an appropriate time frame after receipt of the town plan commission recommendation. So after receipt of the recommendation. Honestly, I don't know what 2-2 means in terms of a recommendation.
My recommendation to both bodies would be
No pun intended.
to, yes, would be to not take any action on the second part of the proposed code change and consult with the village attorney on the next step as to whether the petitioner could petition to the village board, if that would be an option, or if the petitioner would need to rework the proposed code until it became
Sean, isn't the, and Brad, the board, everybody.
And the board doesn't have to take action
yeah.
tonight anyways. The planning commission can take
Doesn't have to
action.
it doesn't have to take action tonight, right?
Right.
That's number one. Number two, isn't this a legal interpretation?
Yeah, it
of
is.
our
I don't
code?
want to
Because-
say the wrong thing because I
Right,
just
because
don't know.
I remember, well, gee, well, the question, let me see if I can articulate the question. Attorney Macy, legal advice. Our code says you read it upon a recommendation. There is no recommendation. It's a tie vote 2-2. If we recommend to deny, it's a tie vote 2-2. Recommend to approve, it's a tie vote 2-2. What is that? When the motions
two-
of
but
all-
doesn't a 2-2
all the motions fail. So
2-2
there is no recommendation. That's the way
Yeah.
I view it. Now, you say, well, no, it's a recommendation to deny.
Right,
Because
'cause-
the plan commission didn't recommend approval.
There's no
Right.
motion that passes through. Yeah.
But I would consult with the attorney, usually in planning stuff, the village board can be petitioned or does have final say on these matters.
Well, and I'll shed some more light on that. We're proposing changes to the ordinance here that talks about giving the plan commission 75 days to actually produce a recommendation to the board, whatever it may be. So if after those 75 days, there's no action given by the plan commission, maybe that means a tie vote, that the board can take action within 75 days.
Without
Without any recommendation from the
whatsoever.
plan commission. So I don't know if that plays into it too. I would recommend, based on Brad's advice too, second is that the board doesn't have to take action tonight. Let's run it by Attorney Macy and get his opinion on it, and the board at its next meeting can take.
Next meeting not being
Well,
tomorrow.
not being tomorrow,
obviously.
right?
Yeah, we're not.
Do you want to have a vote on the proposed language less that one sentence deletion?
Well, here's less than one sentence. His advice is not to take votes on parsing language or making any changes to the language. Because it's proposed by the petitioner.
Right, so you could vote it all down now, and the petitioner could come back with changed language if that's what he wanted to do. But that would be your choice.
And the board could take action on the first motion, the 10 to 20%. And I think that's what you're saying to the board, Sean, or you're recommending to the board. You can take action if you're so desire on the recommendation because it, against the 10 to 20. But on the second one, on the definition, there is no recommendation. You're saying, well, you could table that for further legal advice.
That's right.
Is that right? Did
Yeah,
I-
the board
did I
can,
per-
the board can take action on one item or.
Or no items.
Or no items.
Right, and I suppose they could even ignore what we just said.
And take action on both of them
And take
and-
action on
yeah.
both of them. Okay, so we're on village, I think the plan commission on this item is finished. The meeting's not done because the Craigs are still back there, waiting patiently.
Patiently.
So we'll go to village board. Action, so we'll take them in order. So the first, so you've received so Sean, the board has received a motion not recommending denial. So do we need a motion to deny this, I suppose, or just take no action? And it's just-
Yeah, or to table it, you can table
Or you
it.
table it, so.
I would make a recommendation that the board approves the recommendation from the planning commission
To,
not to deny the additional
okay, so.
Floor space.
A motion to.
Accept the recommendation.
Yeah, motion to accept the recommendation from the plan commission to deny the 10,
that,
the so-called 10 to 20% proposed amendment.
right.
How's that? So we know what we're talking about. I will second that. Discussion? Is that with you made the motion?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we've been beating it up.
Yeah,
I mean, any discussion from the trustees?
nothing here.
I guess I still don't understand if we, like Mr. Rinaldi said, we've set all the walls in place, so if the occupancy can't change, why are we limiting the additional space? If they need to go from 10 to 20%, to be able to put their kitchens, their bathrooms, their other stuff in there. It doesn't have anything to do with the occupancy.
Technically, we're just changing the code. Their conditional use would have to be changed before they could make any changes
Believe
anyway.
me, they're gonna come back with their changes for the
Right.
conditional use. There's no question about it.
You can't predict that either, but.
There's
Oh,
no
yeah.
question about that.
Yeah, we
You
can't.
make a pretty
That was
good guess, though.
established by Mr. Alex's comments, okay, in the public hearing. So you can't say, I'm making that up, okay? So,
So I don't know. Right now, I'd rather table it than, because it doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't really have
well, I
anything.
suppose you could.
Well, the motion's to,
Motion's on the floor.
Just
We have to
deny.
vote on it
Right,
regardless,
so-
yeah.
So I suppose if you wanted to table, I suppose the answer is vote no, and if you get in the majority, then you can make your own motion, right? As a matter of procedure. Any other discussion? Trustee Dashik, Newman? Okay, we'll have a vote. All in favor, the motion, remember, is motion to, what?
To deny.
Yeah, to deny the 10 to 20% proposed amendment. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
aye,
I'm opposed.
So that motion fails 2 votes to 3,
right.
even though you made the motion.
Even though I made the motion, that was just to get things rolling here, guys, come on.
Okay, motion fails.
Right.
Is there another motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we table it and deal with it at the same time that we deal with the other,
The definition.
the definition part.
Is there a second to that motion? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we're on the definition. You heard you're sitting here. I mean, everybody's heard it. You've heard Sean, you've heard Brad, you've heard me, heard all the discussion. Is there a motion? Well, I'll make a motion to table that item pending legal advice.
I'll second
I'll make
that.
a motion to table the vote on the proposed modifications to the definition, so that we can, in order to
resolve the tie issue by the attorney.
resolve the issue, the
Yeah.
legal issues. How's that? Is there a
I'll
second?
I'll
second.
second it.
Well,
Doesn't matter.
Brad, you can get a second.
Dylan seconded.
Okay.
You were done. So
Okay,
got it.
all right. Any discussion? We beating it up. All in favor of the table?
Aye,
Aye. Opposed? Motion. You vote,
I agreed.
Okay.
I said aye.
okay. A motion to table is approved. We are now on to number 7. It's 10 after 9. Anybody need a break, Mr.? Yeah, I need a break. Mr. and Mrs., I'm going to have to go out and get another glass of water, I think. So we will take a 5-minute break, 9:15. Oops. I'll plug you in a second.
Yeah, we'll have to, get Attorney Ace's opinion, and then we'll post on, not tomorrow, but the agenda, but board, not a plan commission, it'll be board, so it could be in a couple of weeks.
We've got a meeting in, we got 2 regular meetings in January.
Then we
Yeah.
can know more. He might say that the planning commission, would recommend planning commission come up with a recommendation.
I don't think we have to, though.
I don't think we do either,
I
but-
think it's gonna be, either he's gonna say the board can't take any action without a recommendation, or he's gonna say that, we can. I just don't know what it is. I've never come across a situation before, so.
We're good with that.
Yeah, it's new stuff.
All right, we'll keep you posted. Thank you for the discussion. Thank you.
Ask a question. Is there any ordinance that says we have to have at least a minimum of 5 people on the planning commission?
There's state statute that Board of Appeals has to, but our village doesn't really adhere to that, but.
We haven't, we
Open spot right now, so that's why it's 4.
we do have an ordinance that says 5 plan commission members, but I don't know if this is anything about how soon it has to be filled, like for an open vacancy. Carl, do you know anything about
I
that?
don't think it says anything.
Usually it doesn't, and all you would need is a quorum of the plan commission too.
So you need 3. You need 3, if 5's normally required, you just need 3 to show up.
In state statute regarding board of appeals, 5 and 2 alternates, and then you have to fill the alternates. I think right now we have 4, is village version. But might be good to have in circumstances like that.
What, who's 7?
Yeah, question on your process here. How do you run a plan commission with 4 people? Don't you need a 5th just for tiebreaker? Wouldn't you need 2 and 2, and then
Yeah,
the
there's-
person running the meeting would be the tiebreaker,
By
right?
ordinance, you have 5 on there right now, we have an open spot.
I see.
Because we're looking for people to join
Yeah.
the plan commission.
I volunteered.
Yeah, so we're,
Hey, not even for mine, but I don't think I get it.
so that's why
Yeah.
there's a tie.
Okay,
Could be a tie.
sure, makes sense.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Sorry about the delay when you schedule public hearings. You got to set a time, so we put them first. I'm assuming you're not going to take 2 hours and 15 minutes. I hope
You
not.
never know.
You never know. We got to wait for Sean.
Motion to approve.
You are getting a little scraggly here, Dan.
I know, it's my winter coat.
Nicole, you have to get on it for that. It's cold outside. I understand. Good news, no attorney comments, policy decision. And, oh, Sean's not back. This water is 35 degrees. Out of the car door. I don't know why I'm so thirsty or dry today. I can hardly horse and everything else. Hope I'm not getting sick or anything. All right, Sean. It's 9:15. We're back. We're done with recess. Next item on the agenda is discussion, and possible action on a final certified survey map for Dan and Nicole Craig for the property located at S104W26630 Maple Avenue. As we start these things, Sean, you'll kick us off with your report. We're kind of doing a more detailed agenda now on behalf of the Plan Commission and the board with our new administrator on board. So we'll have planner's report, petitioner, if you have comments, and presentation. Then we'll have a joint discussion, and then we'll have Plan Commission action and Village Board action. Normally on final certified survey maps was this coming, the Plan Commission makes a recommendation to the Village Board, and it's on our next Village Board agenda. But since the Village Board had to be here anyway, and we have a pretty full agenda tomorrow night, I thought I'd keep you guys just for a little bit longer, since you're here anyway. So Sean, why don't you take it?
Yeah, I'll do my best to speed this along. Thank you guys for sitting through that, the last agenda item. The petitioners came to us originally in December 2021 with a concept to divide a lot on the west side of their property and the east side of their property on Maple. Maple Avenue divides their property north and south. There's 118 plus acres there on each side of Maple, and they also own another 117 acres north of that. There is an overall concept plan that was established in terms of a road layout in the future if they divided these off. The west CSM's 5 acres, that was approved by the Plan Commission and Board back in, when was that? That was in September of this year, September 14th. The Plan Commission recommended approval. The board approved it on the 15th. So that one's good to go. This actual east side one came before the Plan Commission a couple months ago. The Plan Commission looked at it. I had a couple of technical questions and things that had to be fixed. It was previously a 4-acre lot. It's been modified to a 5-acre lot, which makes it simpler for the density calculation, so that no deed restriction has to be put on the property for as to where the development rights remain with this property or the parent property. So they've essentially met all the requirements and all the technical issues that we had. One of them was a right-of-way dedication for Maple Avenue. They were dedicating additional land that isn't required because Maple Avenue only has a 66-foot right-of-way. So the only outstanding issues here are, there's 2 things. One, there's a waiver that's required from the Plan Commission for the remnant parcel not to have to be surveyed. That was also approved as part of the division on the west side, but it also has to be done as part of this one. So if that waiver is approved to not require the whole remnant parcel to be surveyed, then there has to be a note added to the CSM, which once this is approved, your surveyor can just slap a note on there and then it'll be good to go. The only other thing is that there's an existing accessory building on the property. It's that's not allowed by our current code. You can't have an accessory building without a principal building. However, we are proposing changes to the zoning ordinance that'll be it's actually next item on the agenda for the Plan Commission to move back to the board, but that's been talked about for the last year, that essentially allows accessory buildings to be on properties that are used for ag use currently to exist prior to a residence being built. So if that's approved, which I have every intention of pushing that through the process, if that's approved, then that accessory building would be legal, but we just can't sign the CSM or record the CSM until those zoning changes are made. Now, I understand that accessory building, last we talked, might be an accessory building or might be converted to the actual house itself. That was up in the air last time we talked about it. I don't know if that's been decided or not, but it's irrelevant. There's a condition in the approval that basically says that the village shall not sign the certified survey map until the property is in compliance. So that means that either the zoning ordinance is amended or that accessory building is removed from the property. But again, the intent is to amend the zoning ordinance, and it's currently proposed that way. So again, all previous comments have been satisfied. The Plan Commission would just have to grant a waiver from section 200-25 for not requiring the survey for the remnant parcel per section 214 of the Village Code of Ordinances, and then would recommend to the village board approval of the CSM for the Craigs for the property in question, according to my conditions. So that's my report.
Sean, a question on the conditions, the waiver, which we'll get into discussion and talk about so that we can follow your report in the 2/3 vote. Is the waiver, under the waiver in number 7, you say if this waiver is granted, a note referencing the waiver should be added to the CSM. Is that a condition in here? I thought.
Number 3, yeah, it's
It's
condition
number
3.
3? Okay. Where is it in number 3? I'm lost in here somewhere.
It's bottom of page 3, my staff recommendations. Do you not have the latest version of my staff
Maybe I
report?
don't have the latest version.
Yeah, it had been, my report would have been dated December 9th. And that condition is
Oh,
in there.
okay, I'm looking at the wrong copy, sorry. Okay, tell me where it is.
Page 3.
Oh, yeah,
at the
there it
bottom,
is.
number 3.
Number 3, a note referencing the remnant parcel is granted by the plan shall be added to the certified survey map. Great. And then the other one,
Is number 2, so the village shall
is-
not sign until the property is in compliance, and that's just the,
property, that would go to the accessory building?
that's what it references. Essentially, that's what the attorney recommended in terms of a condition, to not be
Oh, okay. And-
specific about what has to happen or whether the zoning code has to be amended or whether the building has to be removed. It just has to be in compliance. And so it wouldn't be in compliance until either one of those two things happen. And again,
Okay.
the intention is to amend the code to allow that to happen.
Okay, so that's the condition, referencing back in, that's really relates to number 3, the accessory building.
Correct.
Okay. That was my questions, just to make sure your report made its way to the staff recommendation conditions.
Right.
Plan commission following along. And then on the remnant parcel waiver, that's a plan commission
Only
waiver
item.
only.
That's right.
And the final certified survey map is a recommendation to the village board. So a lot of times the village board doesn't hear about all this backstory here, and we try to get it right.
So just to refresh your memory, there was a waiver granted for the other 5-acre parcel.
Right.
To exclude the remnant because it didn't necessarily impact. It's a very large parcel. I think the discussion was that there was nothing gained from making them spend the money to survey the whole thing for this one small parcel, and it could be done at the time
Right.
of development. Again, and 40 acres is the threshold. So anything above 40 acres can be excluded per waiver, and that's much, much, much larger than 40 acres.
And that was discussed in that waiver granted at our
September
September
14th.
14th or 15th?
That's a type. That's a typo. It
typo?
should be September 14th. The board took action on the 15th.
Okay. That's right. That was the month where we had, just like this month, where we had back-to-back meetings. Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Craig, if you want to introduce yourself and state your name and address for the record, and then I'll ask you if you agreed with Sean's report.
Okay, Dan and Nicole Craig, S104 W26630 Maple Avenue. And I agree with his report. Yeah.
Okay. Sean laid it out. I think on the waiver, I guess, is the place to start. As you pointed out, Sean, we did discuss it at length on our September 14th meeting. The Plan Commission did, and granted the waiver, as you pointed out, 117 acres, far in excess of the 40. There is not that much to be gained, if anything, to require a full survey. Obviously, when that parcel of land, if and when ever, is further developed, eventually it'll have to be surveyed, So the 5 points would be whether the request for waiver, if granted, would be consistent with the general intent of the chapter. I think we found that it was, in particular for this parcel, whether the request for the waiver, if granted, would adversely affect the property owners in the surrounding areas. We found, I think before, no effect, let alone adversely affect the property owners, whether that property is surveyed or not in connection with this CSM anyway. Obviously, in the future, it might, to set boundaries or establish boundaries in the event that there is a dispute. Whether the waiver, if granted, would benefit the petitioner's project in any way, which is not inconsistent with the village interest. I think before we said, obviously it would, it'd save you the money, it'd get your CSM passed without a big survey. Is it inconsistent with the village interest? No, I think the village's interests, Sean, are, we want to have accurate borders and lots and subdivisions and things like that, but that's not really applicable in this particular case. And he did get the parcel itself surveyed, right, Sean? And
The 5 acres
the
is
5 acres is
correct.
marked, it's posted and everything. Whether the petitioner is full compliance with applicable ordinance and agreements, I think the answer to that is yes. And whether instead of granting the request, the chapter itself should be changed to accommodate the kind of situation. That would require a ordinance amendment to exempt out, I don't know what,
Right.
was
And
over 100 or something, and we just never go there. If that's really true, that's not really I don't think we should hold up the waiver if the Plan Commission had a mind to do that. These waivers have been working. I think we got to take them on a case by case.
they're case by case. If we see something that says, hey, we think they should be surveyed because of this, there's some boundary disputes here, whatever it might be. But in this case, it's very, very simple. It's a small corner of the property that the rest isn't impacted.
Driveways, right-of-ways, whatever the case on a case-by-case basis. So I think the first thing to do is make sure the plan commission is of a mind to grant that waiver, and we can combine it in one motion according to Sean's staff recommendation. But remember, it's got to be a 2/3 vote, so in our case, 2/3. Yeah,
It's 3/4.
yeah, it's 3/4, right. So 3 people have to approve it. Now, if it's unanimous, it's done. Or even 3 people, it's done. Otherwise, we'll take separate motions, but I'm not anticipating that plan commission. Mario says, yeah, no separate. Dan?
I've got some discussion.
Okay,
We show 2 existing buildings in a parcel to the west. We're creating a new lot line there.
Mm-hmm.
They don't show the distance to the lot line on those buildings,
The closest one is 20.5 feet.
but the other 2 are less than 50, in my calculation.
They are less than 50, which means they can't be used for animals.
Do we need a note on this survey stating that those buildings cannot be used for housing livestock?
You could certainly add that to that, but it would also go without saying. I mean, the rule is the rule is the rule, no matter what,
Well,
whether or not
I know that.
you state it. And I don't think there's any animals on the property now.
are there any animals now? No? Okay. And there's no animals in the accessory building, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Should that be documented in some way though? I don't know. Bring that up.
We could have a note added to this, basically, that says that any building within 50 feet of the lot line cannot be used for the housing of animals.
And if possible, tomorrow you could sell that 117 acres and get a new owner.
You know, yeah, that would apply to the one on the property as well. And that's within 40 feet. So,
And they should probably know that.
yeah, so their survey already has to add a note regarding the waiver acceptance. So this note wouldn't be a big deal to add.
Yeah, the purpose of the notes, we're not trying to gum up your CSM or your deeds. Purpose of the notes is really to put a potential buyer on notice of particular restrictions. We're not adding a restriction, in other words, as Sean pointed out. We're just providing notice. It's just, the same thing with the waiver and the same thing with the accessory building being in compliance.
I would add, though, that this CSM has nothing to do with the parcel on the west. That parcel is not part of the certified survey map, the remnant
I
parcel.
realize that, but we're putting in a new lot line close to those buildings.
We are, but any note that's on this CSM only applies to this CSM. Doesn't apply to the buildings to the west. So it might be worth doing anyways because of this particular building. But it doesn't, even though we say it on.
Sean, you're pointing at a building, which one you put? Jim and I
So
don't know which one you
I'm pointing at the
Up the
building on,
upper corner.
notes in the CSM only apply to this lot. This is the only thing the CSM affects is this lot itself. And so any note we add is really just applicable to this lot. So even though we might still mean those buildings to the west of this lot, doesn't matter. And again, the rules apply one way or the other. So does that change your opinion on adding a note or not?
Well, if it's only on this certified survey, people buying the other property wouldn't.
Doesn't pertain, I mean, the rule pertains, but the note doesn't pertain. So do you?
Make sense.
So Sean, the buildings on the proposed 5-acre lot, are they within 50 feet? Is that?
Yes, it's 40.9 feet, so you couldn't have
40.9,
animals
okay.
there.
So they can't have animals. So, Dan, to your point, if there's a deed restriction put on that survey, on the CSM, it would apply to those 2 buildings and they're within 50 feet, so no animals. Sean, I think what you're saying to the mother parcel, the 100-acre, 17-acre, there's some buildings on that parcel that's within now 50 feet.
Yeah,
Is that right?
the closest is, there's a silo that's within 20.5, and there's some other buildings that are close as well. But again, any note that goes on the CSM doesn't
Doesn't apply
those
to that,
buildings.
but the ordinance still does.
The ordinance still does, yes.
Right.
Right.
Right, that's just one of many.
So is it worth, do you recommend we still put it on for this property, or does it go without saying?
It's your intent to include that as part of the home there, in the garage,
So the existing building is gonna be kind of like a garage because Randy Craig's old shop burned down.
Yeah.
So we have no shop. So that's supposed to be like a garage to a house. And it
Connected with a
connects.
breezeway,
And it
like a
connects.
40-foot breezeway.
So it would be where we would park cars next to the house.
No animals.
Yeah.
Okay,
And like
so,
a shop, yeah.
so no note is what Dan is saying.
No, Dan? Jim, do you have any issue?
Nope.
Yeah, I mean,
The rules still apply.
yeah, the rules still apply with or without the note. This is only a note to, put buyers on notice, let's say, that they can't have animals in there. But, you know, to your point, Dan, it's an old farm. Animals may or may not have been in there over the course of whatever.
Well, there's conditional use to have hogs there.
Right, so,
I think the only one in the township. I don't remember.
but you haven't raised hogs for a long time.
Long time.
Right, so that's probably terminated under our
It
rules.
could be.
Yeah, if 12 months, 12 consecutive months, it hasn't been operated, it terminates, yeah.
Okay, so,
I make a motion, the planning commission grant the waiver for this property. Waiver from section 200-25 for the survey for the remnant parcel.
per section 200-14 of the Village Code of Ordinance,
Correct.
and are you recommending to the village board as well?
Yes.
And recommending to the village board approval of the certified survey map for Dan and Nicole Craig for the property located at S104 at W26630 Maple Avenue, McQuonico, Wisconsin 53149, subject to all of the conditions as set forth in the full report dated December 9th, 2022. Sean, is that where we're at?
That's right.
I'll second.
Was that your motion, Dan?
Let it be.
There's a second, so we have a,
We're separating them.
no, we're going to put them all together?
All right.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Solani. Any further discussion? Dan, you made the motion? None? Mario? Jim?
Nope.
I think we beat this one up pretty good. So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Unanimous.
Did you want to do the board on that one then?
Yeah, let's go to the board. So the board, I lost my agenda. The board just heard the recommendation from the plan commission, so the village board can take action. So we'd be looking for a motion to, what is the word that we use, not accept, but? Approve pursuant to the recommendation of the Plan Commission, the certified survey map for Daniel and Nicole Craig for the property located at S104 W26630 Maple Avenue, McQuonico, Wisconsin, 53149, subject to all of the conditions in the Foth report dated December 9th, 2022.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
So just have your surveyor add that note in there from my staff report about the waiver being granted by the plan commission per that section, and then just get it back to us. And again, it can't be signed and recorded until that change in the ordinance is made, and that looks, it's on track for, it still has to be a public hearing, but January is sort of when we're shooting for
Well,
that.
that's the next item on the agenda.
Right.
You don't have to speculate, Sean. We'll have that momentarily. When I stay around, you're welcome, of course. The next item on the agenda is discussion and possible recommendation by the Plan Commission to the Village Board for draft amendments to the village zoning ordinance. This has come out of the Plan Commission once before, and it went to the board. We discovered something we missed, Sean.
Yeah, it wasn't a
And then
section we looked at, but
Yeah, it wasn't when we looked at, but then But then, when we started looking at it, we said, well, this is our opportunity,
We already cracked it
Fix it.
open, we might as well fix it, yeah.
right? And then we had a technical correction to the accessory buildings, to make sure that they couldn't have animals in the accessory building under, as redrafted. When we make an accessory building a principal structure, or generally, you have to have a home there first before you have an accessory building. In this case, for example, that we just approved to CSM, there is no home there, but they're planning to build one, and so that accessory building, instead of making petitioners tear it down, that'll be allowed to stand until they get their home
Right,
built.
it's still being used for agricultural purposes, so it can remain. The clarification that we added to the code and brought it back to the Plan Commission is basically that in those situations where there's an accessory building without a home on a property, that's fine, but we just added that it cannot be used for the keeping of animals. So we want to make sure if someone's keeping animals, that they have they live there too, and there's a home there. So that's it for that one. The other section that we wanted you to reconsider had to do with the changes and amendments to the zoning ordinance or the zoning map, just like we were talking about tonight with Mr. Alex was here. We made some changes to, first of all, to clarify who can make the petition, and essentially the petition can be made by the board, by the village plan commission, by the village administrator, or by one or more property owners. So any of those bodies can bring forward a petition to change the map or to change the ordinance language itself. And then finally, we clarified to make sure that all rezonings and all changes to the zoning ordinance are done by a joint hearing with the Plan Commission and Board, just like happened tonight. In the past, we've done it both ways. We make sure when we do conditional uses that it's always Plan Commission and Board together, so both bodies get the benefit of hearing the public comments if there are any as part of the hearing. We'd like it to be the same for rezonings and map and text amendments, that the Plan Commission and Board both be present to hear the full discussion. And then I also alluded to before is that if in the event that the Plan Commission does not make a recommendation to the board for a rezoning or an ordinance amendment, they can't hold the process up, that after 75 days, the board gets to take action even without a recommendation by the Plan Commission. Finally, we struck something that was in the code about a 3/4 vote in case of a protest. In case of protest against such a change to a map or the ordinance, duly signed and acknowledged by the owners of 20% or more of the areas of the land in question, that there was a provision to basically for them to be able to stop a rezoning. That used to be required by state law. That's no longer required by state law. So the attorney recommended that we strike that section of the code, and so we've done that. That's the extent of the changes that we made since the last time the Plan Commission has seen this and recommended it for the village board. So, Plan Commission, do you have any questions?
Where did the 75 days come from? That
That-
seems to be a long time.
It was, we talked about it because it was just over 2 months. So instead of, we didn't know when dates, like meeting dates would fall. So it gives a 2-month lead time plus a little wiggle room depending on where dates fall. So the 75 sort of covers anomalies in the schedule.
Right, and it was really, yeah, otherwise, we started with 60, and then
And we bumped it to
some
75
smart
days
guy
just
on
to,
the
just
phone
to catch
said,
them
well,
both sides.
you know, the calendar changes. One
Yeah.
time it's, September 14th, and the next meeting's October 12th, and then December
We wanted to make
15th.
sure we
And didn't wanna
encapsulate at least
flip-flop
2
with
meetings.
the 31-day month, or the second Wednesday of the month, so we just said.
Yeah, that's going to cover at least 2 Plan Commission meetings. Right?
That's why. Give the Plan Commission 2 meetings to.
It just seems like a,
It does seem
It
it
does.
seems arbitrary, but there was some thought behind it. Yeah.
okay.
So yes, yeah, we figured out 75.
Mm-hmm.
It could be 72, I suppose, but I mean, it's.
So all we're looking for is just to recommend it back to the village board to set a public hearing. And then there'll be, we're hoping it gets, and the village board will take action, I'm assuming,
Tonight, maybe.
tonight to set a public hearing date for the changes to the zoning ordinance. If not, they could set it at a later time.
Right. So We've been working on this practically.
For a year. We've been working on it for a
Practically a
year.
year and had a pretty good draft in August, and it came back on these last couple of things. So everybody's had it. You've got a good red line of everything that's changed from the existing code, right?
Right, you have everything.
Right, including these latest ones.
Yeah, that's right.
I need
Yeah.
a couple of clarifications maybe.
On the things we talked about tonight or other things?
In the code itself,
No, I
I
mean,
think I missed some of the meeting that you
sure,
went through the first part of it.
okay.
In reading through it again, on page 38, Brent F,
I gotta pull up the full
where
code.
the bus service, and van services. Where do you get there?
Oh, was this about home occupations?
I believe it probably is.
What page do you have in the red line?
Is this gonna prohibit the parking of school buses on private property?
No, that's, commercial vehicle parking is a conditional use that's still allowed, in the code. So that's not that's just home occupations in terms of what happens at the home. Someone could still get a conditional use permit to park a school bus as a commercial vehicle on their property under the conditional use section.
On the next page, 39, friend, or it's just G, towards the bottom, any building determined to be unfit for human habitation or which may endanger health, safety, welfare of the public as may be determined by the village board after recommendation from the plan commission shall be removed pursuant to the procedures outlined in Wisconsin statutes. Won't Wisconsin statutes give the condemnation authority to the building inspector?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow. I'm on page 39. I'm not sure it's the same document that you have. Do you have the latest version?
Well,
This,
The one that was in the packet?
Sean, this would be section 300-8.
Oh, gotcha.
300-8, letter G, if we're having trouble with pagination. But this was not changed other than town to
We
village.
never discussed this, right?
Right, we never discussed it, except changing town to village.
Across it when reading through it.
So it
Are
says,
we taking away that authority from the building inspector, right? Or is this in conflict with state statutes?
Yeah, I'm not sure what state statutes say about that.
I just don't know about, you know better than any of us about what state statutes would say on it.
The authority to condemn buildings, right?
And order them raised?
Yeah.
Usually a duty, the building inspector should do, I believe the ability to do that, in my experience.
Okay, so the building inspector does not currently have that authority without making, I suppose it's gonna come from the building inspector to the plan commission to the board, and the board's gonna say, yeah, raise it.
I don't know if it'd be such a formal process of that.
But the plan commission has to make a recommendation.
But couldn't the ordinance be more restrictive and say, that's fine, but the plan commission first has to authorize it?
I don't, who on the planning commission, other than maybe myself, can go out and condemn a building, that determine that it's condemnable.
Yeah.
We were to rely on an expert, Dan.
Well, that's why that you're leaving.
Right, then
out
why
the
even,
building
why even bring it to the plan commission? I don't know, we haven't talked about it. We should
Yeah.
probably get Vince's opinion on it if you want to change it, which means we'll have to bring it back again, but.
Wait,
Maybe look at it.
The only point I'd make is that we didn't look at every section of the code. We targeted certain things, and so we could certainly save this for next time around. But I just don't want to hold this up for another month if we don't have to.
well, here, how about this? We could set it for public hearing. That could be part of the public hearing. Hey, make that change too, and then we can make the change after the public hearing instead of delaying it another month. Right, Sean?
I don't want to delay it.
I mean, the public hearing, we're gonna have the opportunity to make changes because
Sure.
the public is gonna give.
The public is, we can make changes
Public
there while
might
the
say,
public is there, yeah.
You know, no, I don't think that's right. It should be.
Let me
this.
make a note and I'll ask Vince about that.
I've got another question on page 52.
So you're gonna talk to Vince about that, Sean?
Mm-hmm.
And if necessary, well, Dan, you'll be at the public hearing, I assume,
Right.
and we can, as
Sure.
commissioner, raise,
We can make changes if we think it's appropriate.
right, if we think it's appropriate, right? But John, you're right, we never discussed it. Dan, we never discussed that one.
I know we discussed this one, I'm surprised I didn't catch it at the time. Page 52G4, flush signs. These are signs not requiring a permit.
Oh, yeah, we went through that. Yeah.
Flush signs carved into or affixed flat to a building in such a way that they are not directly illuminated, are not made of reflecting material, do not contrast sharply in color with the building, and which do not exceed 2 inches in thickness. Well, anybody could paint a piece of plywood and stick it on their building without a permit.
Yeah, I don't remember spending too much time talking about that one, and I wrote these requirements, and some are borrowed from other places as well, but I could potentially see changing that one to say flush signs carved into a building might be different, like a date of the date the building was built and all those things, but
It's wide open.
but affixed to, maybe that's going too far. Any thoughts? That does seem
Do
pretty
we,
open.
are we concerned about what that sign says? Like if it's an address sign, like you
You
just,
can't be concerned about what a
No,
sign
no
says.
permit required.
right, that's what I mean.
No, I'm saying you can't, for First Amendment rights for signage, you can't really be concerned with what the sign says, regardless.
Well,
You can have you can have types of signs. You can talk about types of signs, but you can't say certain copy is allowed and certain copy isn't allowed. That's a First Amendment right.
all
So
right, so,
I would recommend, based on what Dan is saying, is that we just say flush signs, or just not even flush, just say signs carved into a building in such a way they're not directly illuminated, not made to reflect the material, blah, 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 is allowed without a permit. Again, those carved signs are you mostly see them as, as a piece of stone or something that
Isn't that
commemorates the
covered in
building.
tree above that?
black signs cut into masonry service or constructed of bronze? Well, a bronze sign wouldn't be carved in, Dan.
Yeah, that's
It
a
would be-
plaque, that's a
it would be
plaque that's
and
affixed,
drilled
yeah,
in,
yeah.
you know,
But if we're gonna have carved signs down below there, we already have that up above there, right?
No, that's a plaque sign. So that's a plaque sign that's yeah.
Cut into the masonry surface.
Right, so you cut a hole and then you insert the plaque sign.
oh, the cut into is the confusing part, isn't it, Dan? Affixed?
Well,
What
right.
you just, I don't know what's the difference between a sign and a plaque sign?
This is saying a plaque sign cut into, so it's specifically allowed without a permit if you're just cutting it and making it and setting it into the masonry, and so that's the difference.
Probably out of bronze or something.
Right.
Oh, as opposed to carved into the, okay,
Right,
okay.
or just
All right,
attached
okay.
to, so.
So, okay, what else you got, Dan? On this one, Sean, that's it? So on this one, do we just, I'm talking to the plan commission here for the benefit of the board, recommend to the board to set the, what are we calling this, amendment, the amended zoning, or the zoning code amendments with changes made today?
Yeah, changes made to signage only for now, for this flush sign. The other one, we're not making
Right,
now. We'll discuss it at the public hearing when we have more information.
all right. So we're looking, any other discussion, Jim, you got anything?
No, it just, Dan, what's the reason you're opposed to the potentially plywood signs on the side of the,
It doesn't require a permit.
Right, this section is just signs without a permit.
Right.
well, yeah, but that's why you have this section, is defining,
What requires a permit and what doesn't. Somebody can put up a 20 by 30 foot sign made out of plywood. It's not any longer, or not any thicker than 2 inches.
that's true.
Right. We probably should have looked at this a little more carefully when we did it, and it's a good catch because it doesn't even limit size, right? It doesn't even limit the size,
Right.
so it could be very big. People wouldn't even have to put up a nice sign because they could just slap up a
They wouldn't bother.
Right.
Why spend all the money?
They're put a size on it, 4 square feet or something, but I don't know why that's necessary.
So are you proposing just deleting this one?
Deleting that affixed to the building, yeah.
The carved into would be kept.
Okay.
So I have a note to make that change.
And we can make other changes to it. You know, something may come up at this public,
Something may come up at the public hearing. The
including
public-
from a
Yeah,
commissioner
the public may attend and.
or a board member. All we're trying to do is get at the public hearing to get the public's input.
So,
Okay, so we're looking, I don't know if you had a motion for us, Sean, in your narrative.
no, there's no motion here I don't know if we
Just
even
a
had,
motion to recommend to the village board to,
yeah.
a motion to recommend, well, I'll make a motion to recommend to the village board to set the, time, date, and place for a public hearing for the proposed zoning code amendments. What are we saying here? Dated, what is the date on the latest?
The latest date is.
Today.
Well, no, it's actually dated at the top, December 9th draft.
This dated December 9th, 2022, as, what are we going to change? Or delete?
With the change to the signage section.
With the change to signs not requiring a permit?
Right. Relative to,
Okay, just a second, let's get the exact, what is it, 300 13,
Gee,
300 13
G4,
G4,
right.
with the change to section 300 13 G4, as
With-
this,
With respect to deleting attached signs.
with respect, well, why don't we say deleting,
fixed.
why don't we just say the 12/9/2022 draft, deleting 300 13 G4?
No, we're saving the carved portion of it,
Oh, you're saving the, okay.
right. You're still allowing.
With a change to 300 13 G4, what did you say? Well, can we just say as discussed?
Sure.
As
That's perfect.
discussed at the 12/14/2022 Plan Commission meeting. How's that? Good? Is there a second?
second.
You got the motion, Brad? Kind of did it on the fly. On the fly there. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So now we're going to go, since I've got a captive audience here with the village board. You've heard the discussion, so I'm looking for a motion to set the time, date, and place for a public hearing for the proposed zoning code amendments pursuant to the Plan Commission recommendation on today, December 14th, 2022. And so we need to set date, time, and place. So the date would, part of the motion would be the date of, time, and I would assume at the Village of Vernon Hall for the place. So
What are the meetings in January?
we can go as, I don't know, Brad,
This requires a class 2 notice too, so it has to have a couple weeks ahead of time.
yeah, I was just gonna say,
The 19th, be the second meeting for village board.
well, this would be a public hearing for the zoning code. So do we put it on a board meeting, regular
Should be-
board, or plan commission,
It
wouldn't it?
should be a joint meeting.
Joint meeting. Yeah,
Plan commission meets on the 11th, so we have to run it twice, we have to run it on the 4th and the 28th, which means we could probably do that.
That's,
We'd have to get the notice to the paper, next week sometime.
yeah, that's doable.
so that's doable,
Or you could push it, so that'd be for plan commission.
the 11th. How much is gonna be on the plan commission on the 11th, Sean? Brad, do you know?
Right now, we said that once
One potential
That's not
thing,
even
but not much.
preliminary.
So that would be a good time to have a public hearing at the plan commission.
Well, we don't know, it's coming back.
Right.
Alverson House is going back to the board, not the plan commission. If it comes back. Well, it's gotta come back, it was tabled. It's coming back to the board, not the plan commission. Unless the board kicks it back or Macy says, no, the plan commission has to do so, but I can't imagine him saying that.
So the alternative is the next board meeting, which would be when, and then the plan commission would have to attend that board meeting.
Right. Plan commission item. Speaking for myself, since I'm on both, it doesn't really matter to me. But, or Jim, zoning codes are kind of plan commission, so I thought, well, right, guys, I don't know. Yeah, otherwise you guys come in the 11th and then also the 19th. I suppose that might not be a big deal in January, but if the 11th is pretty light, we should probably take care of because we don't know how many people are gonna comment, if any at all. Who knows? Then we have Dan, he's a resident, he makes, just kidding. So January 11th, 7 PM, Village of Vernon Hall. So well, I'll make that motion. Do you have enough of that motion to get it done, or I'll repeat it? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? My phone just blipped off. Damn it. January 11th. Any discussion?
No.
January 11th, 2023, 7 PM, Village of Vernon Hall. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Brad, you can get the notices.
Yeah, we'll definitely get that.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Village President's Report, Newman Hine Proposed Developments, sitting there. Brad's gonna contact at some point the village. So telephone tag there, so there's nothing new to report. Checklist for development, we've kind of put that on hold pending our next developer. Same with model developers agreement. And status of staff research, last meeting, we got a big spreadsheet on conditional use permits and site plan of operations in the Village of Vernon. And I suppose, Sean, we ought to talk about what are we gonna do next step sometime.
Right. Karen said there was a few things she was looking to fill in, but she never touched base and asked questions in terms of what those were. So I don't know what those items
Even our,
that she needed feedback on, but I suspect we could contact her, if, see what she was thinking.
right, or at least get a list or something. I'll take up my position. So that's the village president's report. The minutes, wanted to listen to some of the audio tape from November 9th, which wasn't up on the website, so I would just make a motion to table those minutes for now, until the next plan commission meeting. There's a second. Any discussion on those minutes? All in favor of tabling? Plan commission? Aye. Motion carries. And the village board, is there a second? Village board, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Village board's adjourned. I'll make a motion to adjourn. Plan commission. All in favor, plan commission?
Aye.
Adjourned. 10 o'clock.
Thanks for spending your entire evening here.
Hopefully, we don't have a couple inches of snow on our cars.